The large, shimmering halls of the alien university were filled with students from every corner of the galaxy. They were creatures of all shapes, sizes, and colors, some with scales, others with multiple limbs, and a few who could change their forms at will. But today, the focus wasn't on their differences. Today, all eyes were on Professor Zalgar, a being with glowing translucent skin and a mind as sharp as the edge of a blade. Known throughout the galaxy for his intelligence, he had become famous for giving challenges that tested not just strength, but wit and creativity. And today, he was offering the ultimate test. The students had gathered in the massive auditorium, which overlooked the vast alien landscape below. The sun hung low, casting an eerie purple light over the land, and the air smelled of a strange, spicy scent. The professor stood before them, his hands folded behind his back, looking calm but fierce. He spoke in a voice that was both commanding and filled with mystery. "I have a task for you all," he said, his voice echoing in the cavernous space. "You are to catch the Volgari." A ripple of surprise went through the crowd. The Volgari was a creature of legend, a rare and almost mythical beast known for its speed, strength, and cunning. It was said that only the most skilled hunters in the galaxy could ever hope to catch one. Even the bravest of alien species had tried and failed. The Volgari was not just fast, it was nearly impossible to track, and it had a way of disappearing into thin air whenever it felt threatened. Those who had pursued it had returned empty-handed or never returned at all. The Volgari has eluded every hunter, every tracker, and every genius who thought they could capture it. Zalgar continued, his voice growing colder. "But it is not impossible. If you can catch the Volgari, you will prove your worth, and to the winner, I shall give my highest honor." The students exchanged looks, some excited, some nervous. The challenge was daunting, but to catch the Volgari would mean fame, power, and respect beyond measure. It was a challenge unlike any other. Some of the students, already known for their impressive abilities, were confident they could win. There was Trog, the hulking creature with 4 arms and skin like solid stone. His strength was legendary, and he could crush anything in his path. Then there was Zila, the shapeshifter, who could change into anything she wanted with a mere thought. She had the speed and stealth to match any predator. And of course, there was Naros, the sleek, glowing alien from the planet Tyrex, whose eyes could see into dimensions, giving him an almost supernatural ability to track anything anywhere. But the most unlikely of all was John, a human from Earth. He wasn't large like Trog or fast like Zila. He didn't have any special powers or abilities. He was just an ordinary man, standing among these incredible beings, wondering what he had gotten himself into. He had never hunted anything more dangerous than a deer back home, and now he was supposed to capture a creature that had never been caught before. As the others murmured among themselves, John felt the weight of the challenge pressing down on him. He didn't belong here. He wasn't like the others. But something inside him stirred. He wasn't about to back down. Humans, he knew, had one thing that made them different from every other species in the galaxy: their resourcefulness. Humans didn't always win by being the strongest or the fastest. They won with their brains, their creativity, and their ability to adapt to any situation. Professor Zalgar watched the students with amusement. He knew most of them would fail. They had power, they had skills, but they didn't have what was needed to truly understand the Volgari. This creature was different from anything they had ever faced. It didn't need brute force to be caught. It required something far more subtle, something that only the most unexpected contestants might possess. "I will give you all 1 hour to prepare," the professor continued. "Once you leave, the challenge begins. You must catch the Volgari before sunset. If you fail, you will return here, and you will have no second chance." The students were already gathering their equipment, checking weapons, and making plans. Trog was sharpening his claws, Zila was shifting her form to prepare for the chase, and Naros was scanning the horizon with his glowing eyes. But John stayed still. He didn't have anything to prepare. No weapons, no tricks. All he had were his wits. His mind raced. How was he supposed to compete against these superpowered beings? He knew he wasn't going to win by strength, but maybe, just maybe, he could win by understanding the Volgari. He had always been fascinated by animals, studying them back on Earth. He knew how to track them, how to read their behavior, and how to earn their trust. He couldn't rely on anything the others had, but he could trust himself. As the countdown began, John walked to the edge of the crowd, his heart pounding. The sun was starting to set, and the alien sky began to shift in colors he had never seen before. A strange thrill washed over him. He might not have powers like the others, but he was going to give it everything he had. This was his moment, and he wasn't going to let it slip away. In that moment, the hunt for the Volgari wasn't just a challenge. It was a chance to prove that even the most ordinary being could accomplish the extraordinary. The countdown ended, and the students scattered into the wild. The chase had begun. John stood still for a moment, his mind racing as he watched the other students rush off in different directions. Trog had already barreled into the forest with his massive steps shaking the ground beneath him. Zila, with her slender frame, melted into the shadows, her form flickering like a ghost. Naros, glowing faintly, was already scanning the sky, his eyes darting back and forth as he searched for any sign of the Volgari. John glanced around, trying to find some kind of clue, some trail that might lead him to the elusive creature. His heart pounded in his chest. He had no superhuman strength, no ability to shapeshift, and no special powers. What he did have was an understanding of nature. On Earth, he'd learned how to track animals, how to recognize the signs of their movements, and how to predict where they might go next. But this wasn't Earth. This was an alien planet with unfamiliar creatures, strange terrain, and a beast that had never been caught. Still, he had to start somewhere. He knelt down, looking for any footprints or disturbed soil. The ground was soft, but there was nothing obvious. He then stood up and started to scan the trees above. The Volgari was known to be swift and elusive, able to disappear into its surroundings at a moment's notice. But it wasn't invincible. Every creature left a trace. The trick was knowing where to look. As John walked deeper into the forest, the air grew thicker. The trees were enormous, their trunks twisting into shapes he couldn't have imagined back on Earth. The leaves were a deep purple, and the air was thick with the scent of something both sweet and sour. There was a strange hum in the distance, like a low growl vibrating through the ground. John stopped and listened. It wasn't just the wind. Something was out there. Suddenly, he heard a rustle behind him. His heart skipped a beat, and he spun around. Nothing. But something didn't feel right. The hairs on the back of his neck stood up. He continued walking, but his senses were on high alert now. The forest seemed to be alive, watching him, waiting. A faint movement in the corner of his eye caught his attention. He turned his head just in time to see a shadow dart across the clearing. It was fast, way too fast for anything he had ever seen. His pulse quickened. The Volgari. For a moment, he froze, his body tense. But then, instinct took over. He dashed in the direction of the movement, running as fast as he could. He knew the creature was fast, but he had an advantage. He wasn't relying on brute strength or speed. He was using his knowledge. He slowed his pace as he reached a small ravine, the ground dipping sharply. The rustling stopped, and for a moment, everything was silent. The Volgari was still out there, just waiting, perhaps watching him. John crouched down near the edge of the ravine, careful not to make any noise. He peered into the trees across from him, his eyes scanning every shadow. A rustling sound broke the silence again. This time, John was ready. He reached into his pack and pulled out a small, simple device, a tracker. It wasn't as advanced as the ones the alien students might have had, but it would help him track any large movements nearby. He turned it on, watching the small screen as it began to beep softly. The Volgari was close. With his heart racing, John crept closer to the ravine's edge. He could see faint, glowing eyes in the distance, the shape of something massive yet agile. The creature was hidden, blending with the surrounding foliage. He couldn't see it clearly, but he could feel it. He was getting closer. Just then, a sound to his left made him jump. He turned, expecting to see one of the other students. Instead, it was something else entirely. A group of smaller creatures, their bodies covered in sharp quills and their eyes glowing a deep orange, skittered across the forest floor, moving in unison. They were not dangerous, just a distraction, it seemed. John's focus remained on the Volgari. He had no time for distractions. He knew he had to be careful. This wasn't about charging in blindly like the others. He couldn't match their power, but he could match their patience. As he moved deeper into the forest, the sounds of the hunt grew louder, the other students calling out, the creatures reacting. He kept his eyes fixed on the glowing spots in the distance. The Volgari was still watching him, but it wasn't moving. The tracker beeped again, indicating the creature had stopped. John took a deep breath. This was it. The time to act had come. He slowly advanced, each step carefully measured. The foliage grew thicker, but he could see the creature's eyes now, just ahead. It was close. He felt a surge of excitement. He was about to do something no one else had ever done. He wasn't just hunting. He was learning, adapting. With one final, steadying breath, John stepped forward and reached out, his hand extended toward the glowing eyes of the Volgari. For a moment, everything seemed to freeze. The Volgari was silent. Then, in a swift blur, it vanished. John stood still, his hand outstretched, his heart pounding in his chest. He had lost it, or had he? The creature was close. It hadn't run far. He knew he had one chance to make it work. This was more than just finding the Volgari. It was understanding it. John stood motionless, his hands still extended, hoping that the Volgari might reappear. The jungle around him was silent once more, and the only sound was the faint hum of the alien environment, the rustle of leaves stirred by a gentle breeze. His breath came in quick, shallow gasps as he strained his eyes to see any hint of the creature's glowing form. But there was nothing. The Volgari had vanished. He could feel it. Its presence was still there, but it was hidden, cloaked by its natural ability to blend with the environment. The creature was a master of stealth, and it wasn't about to let itself be captured so easily. For a brief moment, John felt a surge of doubt. He had been so close, so sure that his instincts would be enough to catch the creature. But now, standing alone in the dense alien forest, he was beginning to question everything. The other students, Trog, Zila, Narrows, they all had powers, abilities far beyond anything he could comprehend. What did he have? Nothing but his wits, and right now, it didn't feel like enough. He took a deep breath, forcing himself to calm down. Panicking wasn't going to help him. He needed to think like the animal, to understand what the Volgari would do next. He had learned that animals, no matter how wild or elusive, follow patterns. They didn't just run and hide for no reason. There was always a purpose behind their actions. The Volgari wasn't running, it was waiting. It had seen him. It knew he was there. But it wasn't ready to strike. It was testing him, watching him closely, waiting for him to make a mistake. John's eyes narrowed as he scanned the surrounding trees. There, a movement. The Volgari's eyes glowed faintly from behind the thick branches of a towering tree. It was watching him again, but this time, it didn't seem to be retreating. It was curious. Maybe, just maybe, there was a chance. He moved slowly, inching forward, careful not to make a sound. His eyes never left the glowing spots of light that signaled the creature's presence. His heart beat loudly in his chest, but he focused all his energy on the task ahead. He wasn't going to charge in blindly like the others. This was his moment to outsmart the Volgari. John took another step, this time making sure the ground beneath his feet didn't crack or break. He crouched low, his movements deliberate, as he closed the distance between him and the creature. The jungle seemed to close in around him as he moved, but he didn't feel the need to rush. He could feel the Volgary's tension, its awareness of him. It was waiting for the right moment to act. Suddenly, the creature shifted again. It was fast, but not fast enough. John had anticipated its move. As the Volgary darted to the right, he sidestepped, positioning himself between the creature and its escape route. The Volgary paused, its glowing eyes locking with his. For a brief moment, they stared at each other. It was as if the creature was studying him, weighing him up. John felt an overwhelming sense of connection in that moment. This wasn't just about capturing a beast. This was about understanding it, respecting it. The Volgary wasn't an enemy to be defeated. It was a wild creature with its own instincts, its own intelligence. And right now, it seemed to be considering him as a worthy opponent. John's hand twitched, his fingers tingling with the urge to reach out. The creature hadn't run. It was waiting for him to make the next move. He knew that if he made any sudden actions now, he would lose the chance. The Volgary had proven itself to be smarter than anyone had expected. In a slow, deliberate movement, John dropped to one knee, lowering his height to appear less threatening. He then extended his hand toward the Volgary, palm open, fingers spread. The gesture was one of calm, of peaceful intent. His movements were slow and controlled, giving the creature time to react, time to decide whether or not it would allow him any closer. The Volgary's glowing eyes narrowed as it watched his every motion. John could see its muscles tense, ready to spring into action if necessary. He didn't move a muscle, his gaze fixed on the creature. Every instinct told him to keep his hand steady, to not reach too quickly. The Volgary needed to feel in control of the situation, just as much as John needed to feel in control of his own emotions. Then, without warning, the creature took a step closer. John's heart skipped a beat. Was it about to attack? Was this a trap? But the Volgary didn't move aggressively. It circled around him, its glowing form casting strange shadows in the alien jungle. John could feel the air shift as the creature drew nearer. With a final decisive step, the Volgary stopped in front of him, just within arm's reach. Its eyes locked onto his, and for the first time, John saw a flicker of something softer in them. Not aggression, not fear, just curiosity. John slowly reached out with his hand, just an inch at a time. The Volgary's muscles relaxed slightly, as if it were deciding that this human wasn't a threat after all. And then, to John's astonishment, the creature took another step closer, its enormous body brushing against his arm. It was happening. In that moment, everything else disappeared. The other students, the challenge, the pressure, it all faded away. It was just him and the Volgary, two beings from different worlds, connected by an understanding that went beyond words. John gently laid his hand on the creature's smooth, glowing skin. The Volgary flinched, but didn't pull away. John felt a strange sense of triumph, but also an overwhelming sense of awe. The creature was allowing him to touch it. In that moment, John knew he had done something no one else had. He had earned the trust of the Volgary. But even as the creature stood still before him, John knew this wasn't the end. The Volgary hadn't been tamed, not completely. There was still more to learn, more to prove. But for the first time since the challenge had started, John felt like he was in control. And that, in itself, was a victory. As the sun dipped below the horizon, casting a crimson glow across the alien landscape, John stood at the edge of the clearing, his senses heightened. The Volgary had led him here, deeper into the heart of the forest, its glowing eyes now a mere flicker in the distance. The creature had tested him, observed him, and now, it seemed, was ready for the final act. John's hand instinctively reached for the simple tracker strapped to his wrist. It had been his only tool in this alien environment, a small device that beeped softly, indicating the presence of large movements nearby. But tonight, it remained silent. The Volgari had learned to move without leaving a trace, its presence undetectable by conventional means. The air around him grew thick with tension. Every rustle of leaves, every snap of a twig sent his heart racing. He knew the creature was close, but where? Suddenly, a low growl echoed through the trees. John spun around, his eyes scanning the darkness. There, emerging from the shadows, was the Volgari. Its massive form loomed before him, its glowing eyes fixed on his every movement. The creature's muscles rippled beneath its sleek, bioluminescent skin. It was a perfect blend of grace and power, a predator at the peak of its evolution. But John stood his ground. He had come this far, and he wasn't about to back down now. The Volgari took a step forward, its massive paws silent on the forest floor. John's hand tightened around the makeshift spear he had fashioned earlier. It was crude, but it was all he had. He raised it, pointing it directly at the creature. For a moment, time seemed to stand still. The Volgari and John locked eyes, each sizing the other up. Then, with a sudden burst of speed, the creature lunged. John reacted instinctively, sidestepping the attack and thrusting the spear forward. The tip grazed the Volgari's side, drawing a hiss of pain. But the creature was relentless. It spun around, its claws slashing through the air. John barely managed to duck, the claws missing him by inches. He knew he couldn't keep this up forever. The Volgari was faster, stronger, and more experienced. But he had something it didn't: determination. With a surge of adrenaline, John feigned a stumble, dropping to one knee. The Volgari took the bait, charging forward. At the last second, John rolled to the side, narrowly avoiding the creature's jaws. He sprang to his feet, his spear raised high. The Volgari skidded to a halt, its eyes narrowing. It was no longer just a hunt. It was a battle of wills. John took a deep breath, steadying his nerves. He wasn't just fighting for survival. He was fighting to prove that humanity had a place in this galaxy, that they could stand toe-to-toe with the most formidable of creatures. The Volgari growled, its posture shifting. It was preparing for its next move. John knew he had to act fast. With a battle cry, he charged, his spear aimed directly at the creature's heart. The Volgari leaped to intercept, but John was ready. He sidestepped, thrusting the spear forward with all his might. The tip of the spear pierced the Volgari's side, drawing a roar of pain from the creature. It staggered back, its glowing eyes filled with fury. But John didn't relent. He pressed the attack, his movements fluid and precise. The Volgari retaliated, its claws slashing through the air. John ducked and weaved, narrowly avoiding each strike. Finally, with a well-placed strike, he drove the spear deep into the Volgari's chest. The creature let out a final, guttural growl before collapsing to the ground. John stood over the fallen beast, his chest heaving with exertion. He had done it. He had defeated the Volgari. But as he looked down at the creature, a sense of respect washed over him. The Volgari had been a worthy opponent, and he had learned much from their encounter. As the stars began to twinkle overhead, John knew that this was only the beginning. The galaxy was vast, and there were many more challenges ahead. But he was ready. For he was human, and he had proven that humanity could stand tall among the stars. As John stood over the fallen Volgari, his body still trembling from the intense battle, he realized that the fight wasn't just about survival. It was about something more profound. He had learned more than he had ever expected. His victory over the creature wasn't a result of strength, speed, or raw power. It was his mind, his persistence, and his unwavering determination that had won the day. In a strange way, the Volgari had not only tested his skill, but had also helped him prove something vital. Humans, despite all their weaknesses and limitations, could rise to face even the fiercest challenges. The alien jungle around him was eerily quiet now, the once tense atmosphere now tinged with a sense of awe. John's breathing steadied, and his mind slowly drifted from the adrenaline-fueled rush to something more reflective. He knelt down by the Volgary's body, his hand resting on the creature's glowing skin. He had just ended the life of a powerful being, a true hunter of the wild, but he couldn't help but feel a sense of respect for it. The Volgari had been fierce, cunning, and strong, traits John respected. But what made the difference was his understanding of it, the way he had approached the hunt with patience, precision, and a willingness to learn. It wasn't just about defeating an opponent. It was about understanding them and earning their respect in the process. John slowly stood up, wiping the sweat from his brow. The sun was now setting fully, casting long shadows across the forest. The stars began to twinkle in the dark sky above, as if marking the end of a chapter and the beginning of something new. He took one last look at the Volgari before he turned to head back to the clearing where the other students had gathered. But as he made his way back, he could already hear the sound of voices ahead, the excitement and chatter of the other students who had no doubt completed their own tasks. He could almost feel their surprise when they saw him. No one had expected him to succeed, let alone defeat the mighty Volgari. After all, the challenge had been designed to test the limits of their abilities, and John had no special gifts or powers. He was simply human. When he arrived back at the clearing, all eyes turned to him. Trog, Zila, and Narrows were already there, standing in awe as they saw the Volgary's glowing eyes flickering faintly behind him, a clear sign of his victory. "What happened?" Zila asked, her voice full of disbelief. "How did you?" John couldn't help but smile. "It wasn't easy, but I learned something important. It's not always about raw power. Sometimes, it's about understanding your opponent and finding a way to adapt." Trog raised an eyebrow, clearly impressed, but still skeptical. "So, you tamed it?" he asked. John nodded, still catching his breath. "Not tamed. Just respected. It let me get close, and I used that to my advantage." The silence that followed was thick with awe. Narrows, who had always been the most reserved, finally spoke up. "You did it. You actually did it." John shrugged, his modesty kicking in despite his accomplishment. "I just stayed calm and kept my focus. Nothing special." But the truth was, John knew that what had happened here, in the heart of the alien jungle, was a game changer. He hadn't just completed a challenge, he had set a precedent. The others might have had powers, special abilities, and advanced technology, but none of them had done what he had done. They had relied on brute strength or superior technology. But John had relied on something far more human: his ingenuity, his ability to learn from the world around him, and his unwavering determination. As the group gathered around, Professor Laza stepped into the clearing, his eyes scanning each of them carefully. "Well done, students. Each of you has faced a challenge that required more than just your abilities. It required you to adapt, to grow, and to push beyond what you thought possible." He turned to John, his gaze sharp and calculating. "You, however, have proven something else entirely. You have proven that humans, despite being without the advanced abilities of the other races, are capable of more than we ever anticipated." John's chest swelled with pride as Professor Laza's words sank in. He had done it. He had earned not just the respect of the creature, but the respect of his peers and the professor himself. "You've shown us all," the professor continued, "that it's not just strength, speed, or technology that makes someone capable. It's the will to never give up, to keep fighting when it seems impossible. You've proven that humans can stand among the greatest in the galaxy." The other students, who had once looked at him with doubt or amusement, now regarded him with newfound respect. Trog gave him a nod, Zila's eyes widened in admiration, and Narrows smiled, finally acknowledging the truth in the professor's words. For the first time, John felt like he truly belonged. The galaxy was vast, and the challenges ahead were endless. But he now knew that humanity had something invaluable: the ability to rise to any occasion, no matter how overwhelming it seemed. It wasn't about being the strongest, the fastest, or the most powerful. It was about heart, It was about determination. And in that moment, John knew he had proven that the human spirit was something that no alien could ever conquer. As the stars above twinkled brighter than ever, John took a deep breath, ready for whatever challenges awaited. Because he knew one thing for certain: he was ready to face them all.